Welcome back to Inside Personal Growth. This is Greg Voisin, the host of Inside Personal Growth. And for many of you, you don't know our guest. He's joining us from Cardiff, California. And his name is Bill Gladstone, and he owns Waterside Productions. And I've known Bill for many, many years. And it's a pleasure to have him on the show. I actually think this is the first time he's actually been a guest on Inside Personal Growth. So, Bill, good day to you. How you doing?
I'm doing great. It is the first time I've been on your show. I think I've sent at least a dozen authors who have been on your show in the past. And that's because I'm better known as a literary agent and publisher, but I'm also an author. Though in the past, my books have been novels like The 12 and books that wouldn't necessarily have fit for your show. But today I'm delighted. This book that I just re-released, Dr. and Master Sha, Miracle Soul Healer, documenting a legend, is a perfect fit for your show. So that's why today is the first time you're going to have me on your show.
Well, and you have quite a history with Dr. Sha. It's Dr. and
Sha.
Master Sha.
Sha.
I want to make sure I say it right.
Yeah.
And, the book was fascinating. As I was doing the review, I was reading some of the stories. And, you go back to being introduced to Dr. Sha. It's actually Dr. and Master Sha is how it's referred, through a friend of yours, Rick Freshman. You met him in 2013. What kind of has your journey been like? Because, it was like, okay, let's publish this book. This guy had already been published in other places. He's got another book coming out, and you decided to take this project on. And it seems like it was a real epiphany for you to work with.
Well, it was fun from the beginning, I have to say. So, this is 10 years ago now. We've been very successful. We represented the 4 Dummies series, made a ton of money, and then got into people like Neale Donald Walsch for special projects, Deepak Chopra, Marianne Williamson. So, and then we had a big success, of course, with Eckhart Tolle. So, as an agency, we're kind of a big name. And Rick was a big time publicist in the book business. So he had, represented the Chicken Soup for the Soul authors and some other very successful book authors. And he called me up out of the blue and said, Bill, I've got this author and he's a New York Times best-selling author and he wants an agent. Well, as an agent, who's going to say no? Oh, sure, let me talk to him. And so we set up the call, and for some reason, the call wasn't set up until like 9 o'clock on a Friday night. And I'm in California. And I'm assuming that he's in California. Well, he was actually on the East Coast. So this call went on for a couple of hours. And I'm thinking, oh, it's 11 o'clock. It's getting late. You've been on the call a long time. And I find out it's 2 a.m. And he was as coherent and as fun, I have to say. Dr. Master Sha is a unique individual. He has very high energy, obviously. He has an incredible past of training as both a medical doctor at China's best Western medicine university, but then he also, from the age of 6, was motivated to learn Tai Chi, Qigong, herbal medicine, acupuncture, all of the traditional Chinese modalities for healing. And on top of all that, he's a very intelligent individual who understands business. So the first 2 hours that I spent with him on the phone, we were talking about his contracts. And I was, we don't take people on. I mean, we've made enough money that, yes, we don't ignore it, but it's not our primary motivation. Our primary motivation is helping authors and publishers, because we represent publishers as well, create and distribute books that are going to create a better world. So Dr. Sha fit that, but at the same time, if I don't think I can add value, I'm not going to take someone on. And I was very hesitant because it was like, Master Sha, I looked at the contract Rick had sent it over that he had with Simon & Schuster. I said, you have a great contract. You have great success. Why do you even need an agent? You already have great deals. And he said, well, I did some research and you did the Dummy series. And that's really what I want. I want a series of books, and I want to sell hundreds of millions of books like you did with the Dummies, not just hundreds of thousands of books. I said, well, I can't guarantee that level of success, but, I can actually get you a better deal. There's new things happening in publishing. We can do a profit share deal with someone. You're doing all of the marketing anyway. So yeah, I'll take you on. And that started the relationship. And I had already done the first deal for him. on his first book, which to my amazement, he wrote from start to finish in less than a month. And it was a big book, Miracle Soul Healer. And I ended up selling it to Ben Bella, which was an up and coming publisher, and we got a great deal. And then he was giving a healing conference of some kind in Salomar, California, which is not too far from Cardiff. I can't remember exactly, it's up the coast, but I have other clients, so I always, make a trip every few months up the coast. So I said, okay, let's meet. So I drive up and I'm with my wife, Gail, and I'm in Salomar and I'm looking around and I see this Chinese man in a suit and sitting on a bench. And I said, I bet that's Dr. Sha. But anyway, so we have to go to our hotel and check in and all like that. And then he was the person, and we had arranged to meet at the Chinese restaurant nearby in the town near there. And we went to dinner, and we had about an hour and a half before this event that he wanted to have us participate in, mainly, just observe what he was doing. And I was struck by the fact that he was such a humble guy. I mean, this was not a fancy Chinese restaurant. This was like,
right,
as normal, sort of everyday kind of, and he was just a normal everyday guy. And this is interesting. So then we go to the event, and now it's, 9 o'clock at night, at least, maybe even 10. And this room is full. It's probably close to 1,000 people. I don't know, 600 at least. I don't know the size of it, but it's full. And they're all there, and they're like totally riveted to every word he's saying. And he takes out this blackboard and he starts teaching. He's teaching about the nature of energy and the nature of healing. And there's all diagrams. And it's like, I'm back at college. I mean, this is a teaching. And then about an hour into it, after the teaching, he brings out an individual who they have identified as having had very severe cancer. And they've been able to reduce the cancer from, significant size to a very small size. And they have him there to continue to do the work. So they actually, Master Sha does his, at this time, he was using mostly chanting. He never touched the individual.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually was having the people who were all student healers, which I didn't understand when I first went there. And he was teaching them how to do what he does. Mm-hmm. And that's what really got me interested. Because I've done books about John of God, and I've done books about other miracle healers. But I'd never met anyone who not only was able to heal, but was able to teach others how to heal. So this really intrigued me. And I should share with the audience, I have a background as a scientist. I had an article published as an undergraduate in the Yale Scientific when I was a student at Yale. And then I went to Harvard University, where I studied medical anthropology. So I had a background in this, which is one of the reasons I was so intrigued. And I know about the placebo. And that is, always a factor in healing. In fact, the strongest correlate cross-culturally in all studies of anthropology is that the leading indicator of success is belief in the practitioner, no matter what modality, even with Western medicine. If you don't believe, you have a much less chance of success.
Of healing.
So I thought maybe this is just that. But then, after the success of the first book, Master Sha was not totally satisfied with the results. We sold 400,000 copies. I was satisfied. I thought that was great. But, we still hadn't gotten to our 1 million copy book. And it was actually the publisher of Ben Bella, Glenn Yeffeth, who's a good friend of mine, who said, well, you should do something like your dummies books. You should do like Dr. and Master Sha for Dummies. And of course, we couldn't do that because Wiley owns the For Dummies trademark. But I said, okay, well, I could do it, because I write very quickly and, I enjoy writing. So I said, I'll write a book about Dr. Master Sha. And that was the first edition of Miracle Soul Healer. And my goal in this book is really to introduce people who have no background in healing, no background in spirituality, no background in Chinese techniques.
Or medicine,
Medicine. Who is this Dr. and Master Sha? How has he achieved what he's achieved? What has he achieved? Is there true scientific evidence that these are real? Are they replicable? And then after I had written the first draft of the manuscript, I did share it with Dr. Master Sha, be sure I had everything correct, because there's a lot of individual information about his family, and I wanted to be sure I had everything correct. He said, I like your book, but it's missing a whole part. I said, oh, what's that? You have to talk about my master teachers and students that are also healing. So we added another section to the book. And, there's about a dozen of his top teachers who I also profile, including their successes. And that's where I really, at that time, was completely dumbfounded, because how can you possibly teach someone to do this kind of healing? Because as far as I had been able to determine, it really was based on Dr. Sha's own connection to what he calls the source, or the Tao, and his ability to sort of bring in, and this may sound strange.
Doesn't he call it the Dung Yi Gong, unbelievable power? Speak with the listeners about that. He used this process to heal people.
Yes.
Now, I may be saying this wrong.
No. Well, yeah. And just so you know, I'm going to talk in plain English. I don't use any of his Chinese language because I can't pronounce. And that's, the book has all the Chinese words, and it has even the pronunciation. I don't know why. I'm not dyslexic, but even when I see, oh, you pronounce it like this, I pronounce it incorrectly. So rather than say things that any Chinese listener would say, these guys are idiots, I just use English equivalents. So what I've learned about I do and can pronounce probably qi. Qi is energy.
Yeah.
And qi in the Chinese system is responsible for everything, the movement of energy, everything related to health. And in Dr. Sha's system, qi is controlled by the heart. The heart can send energy to the qi, which is the body, and that can heal. But you have to go to what he calls the soul. So I don't know what the word is being used in Chinese, but I do know the word, but I can't pronounce it properly, but it's the soul. So you go to the soul moves the heart moves the qi, the matter. Because it is, you have to get down to the level of matter. We're all matter. We live at the level of matter.
Right.
But then what I've learned, and I didn't know this at the time I wrote the first edition, this is one of the reasons I rewrote the book and added a lot of material. I have a much better understanding now of the method, because each one of us has what he calls soul energy, but then there's the ultimate soul energy, which is the soul energy of the Tao. And so that's why if I had rewritten this book today and didn't want to use, I would have had to totally rewrite it. I would have changed the title, and I may do a third edition 5 years from now when I understand even more. And I would call it Tao Miracle Soul Healer, because it's really about accessing the Tao. And I now understand from Master Sha that when he's accessing the Tao is, I now co-host an entire show, an hour every week, just going through what they call the Tao Te Ching, which is the original explanation of the Tao written by Lao Tzu more than 2,600 years ago. And on the very first chapter of that, Lao Tzu says the Tao cannot be seen, cannot be heard, cannot be touched, and cannot be understood by human beings. And it's not even called the Tao, but we're going to use the word Tao, and we're going to give as much information as we can so human beings can benefit from understanding the source of all. And it's an eternal source that always has existed. Before,
he calls it universal law and universal science, right?
Yes.
So that's what you refer to it. He had this divine encounter, and your interview with him about the divine encounter and what you learned about what he refers to as universal law, universal service.
Yes, well, that is actually underneath the Tao, because the Tao created heaven and earth. The Tao created the gods, actually. So when he's talking to God, he's talking to let me just finish and then we'll get back into this. But before there was the Big Bang, there was the Tao. After the contraction, because many scientists think the entire universe expands and then contracts, and will come back to, we can't even describe it. It will be so small, and, virtually from our experience at the level of reality we live, disappear, and then the whole thing will start over again. But the Tao itself is immune to all of that. The Tao is before creation, before the Big Bang, after the Big Bang. It's truly eternal. And everything that we can imagine, sense, or possibly experience is derived from the source, from the Tao itself. So it's a fairly complex concept. Science cannot prove it because it's at a level and in a dimensionality that is beyond science. But there's nothing in our science, including many new findings about non-local quantum entanglement, everything that's been discovered in the last 50 years that supports this type of theory. And many of my other authors, including Deepak Chopra, who has written extensively on the subject, that we don't really exist. Now, of course we exist, but we exist almost in the way that a video game exists, where we are not really the creators of our own
hologram. We're
we're a
hologram.
hologram. And anyway, so it can.
And I think the word, the Tao, is a way for people to look at. I'm going to say this because I think you and I have been in this community for a long time, and I'm just about close to 1,000 interviews now with people on spirituality and these kind of things. And sometimes it's a bit amorphous, so you have to kind of put your hands around a word or something to try and explain this. And I get what you're trying to explain is challenging. You do a great job in the book. And that's what I'm going to encourage my listeners. Go get a copy of the book. It's up on Amazon. Check out Waterside Productions as well. If you've got an interest in learning more about Bill, he puts out a weekly or a monthly newsletter as well about all of his new authors. But this is soul healing. You've said this a couple of times. So soul, I want to go back to this soul healing.
Yes, well, and now we're ready for that. I just wanted to get the broader context, which I didn't even know at the time I wrote the book, but you're absolutely right. He comes down to in the book, or you did, from all these practices, Qigong, Tai Chi, acupuncture, all these healing practices are considered energy medicine, right? Yes.
Everybody out there listening in my audiences, they get energy medicine. We've all done it. Speak with us about what you and Dr. Sha, and more importantly, what Dr. Sha says energy medicine is to heal the soul.
Okay. So you start in Master Sha's system of belief. Everything has a soul. Every individual molecule has a soul. Every individual human being has, I don't know if there's a trillion atoms, whatever it is in each of us, but each one of those atoms has a soul, and the soul of that atom controls the destiny of that atom. So what Dr. Sha focuses on is connecting to the soul of the area that is symptomatic. So if you're suffering from, his most recent book was just dealing with back pain. So if you're suffering from back pain, we'll get into this.
So what about the colon polyp that you're dealing with?
I'm working with Master Sha on that. Special calligraphy I could even go get to show to you. And I trace it. Now he's put all of his energy, and he didn't do this when I first met him. This is something he's evolved over the last 10 years. He has found a way to take his healing energy and he goes into what I would call a semi-trance, where he's connecting with a different dimension of reality. And that dimension of reality brings in the healing energy, and he puts it into the calligraphy. And then he has the individual patient trace the calligraphy. You can either do it with your hand. You can actually, the most effective way is it's almost like you do a dance where you're coming from your core and you're tracing the calligraphy. If you're unable to move because you're in a severe medical situation, you can just also do it with your eyes. You can trace it with your eyes. And by doing this, you're recreating the energetic connection that he is able to create with the Tao, with
Okay.
soul. And that is the basis now of the majority of his healing. Now, he has other modalities also. He has Tao Song. So in addition to giving me this wonderful calligraphy, he created a 7-minute chant. And he says, just play the chant. Play it, even when you're sleeping. It's
Right.
going to be working. So, and he doesn't ever promise, because every individual in his belief system has a fate that is linked to that individual's karma. He believes all of us.
So the karma cleansing is we'll go to that. How does it work?
Well,
Because we're looking at karma is all of the things that happen to us through the course of all the various reincarnations or bringing.
well, it's even more complicated than that, because it's not just your karma, it's the karma of your ancestors, of your family, because you
Right.
have the same DNA. So that DNA has responsibility at the cosmic level. So you may have had impeccable past lives. Frankly, in the beginning, I'm not a believer in reincarnation. So I was a little skeptical, but I said, everybody's got their own sort of way. And as long as it works, maybe this is correct. I'm now leaning more, there probably is something to this, but I think it's even more complex than Dr. Sha is stating, because there is a level on which there's sort of the divine law of balance. You can call it the karma law. And I do believe in that. I've seen it, in small ways, but I think, what he's referring to is there's a much larger way, sort of the yin and the yang. Everything's going to be balanced in the end. And so maybe it is true that you've led an impeccable life and you've led a good life in your past lives, but you come from a family that's taken advantage of others, done some terrible things. You're going to have to pay for, the sins of the father, we can call it. So no one is immune to having negative things happen to them, no matter how good a human being you may be. So when that happens, Dr. Sha believes you have to clean up the karma, whether it's your own personal karma or the karma of your ancestors. So that's his first point of attack. And he has ways of helping you do that. And one thing Dr. Sha will always say is, I am just a servant and I am not in charge. You have the ability to heal yourself. I
Right.
give you these tools, use them, and I hope they're going to work for you. But Dr. Sha and I have discussed there are situations where he has, because he does have a connection to the divine, and he just goes in, and if somebody comes to him with a illness that he doesn't feel he can heal, he'll tell them, I can't help you. So it's
Right.
not 100%. In my observations and studies of him, he rarely says no. It's less than 1 to 2% of the time that he'll say, this is something I can't help with. But when he says he can help, he doesn't guarantee. He says, it's really going to be dependent upon the karma of the individual. I can give them the tools, and if they're open to it, in most cases, and I've personally investigated hundreds of cases, and I've seen thousands of cases of miraculous healings. I mean, people with severe cancer, people
Well,
with
spontaneous remission has been around for some time.
Yeah, but
There's
this
books
defines
this thick written on how spontaneous remission occurs.
Yes, but spontaneous remission does not explain how you can have thousands of spontaneous remissions.
No, I get that. What I'm saying though is, also too, to get to this, when we're kind of kicking the tires around this, because I'm not saying you have skepticism. Because
I was skeptical. No, but I was skeptical. You can say.
And then you went to this Rulin Zixiu. I don't know how to pronounce the last name.
Yes.
You said, introduce me to this Rulin Zoo.
Yeah.
Okay. Speak with us about the meeting with her and what you learned about the science of soul healing, because she evidently was another resource for you to actually back up what.
Well, that's what I was saying about the science. She is from China, but she was educated at Berkeley, which is one of the best universities in the United States. And she's a PhD candidate, and then got her PhD with the hope of uncovering the unified field theory. That is sort of the ultimate goal of a physicist. And, you've had thousands of physicists over the ever since Einstein presented the unified field as a concept, trying to derive the underlying reality of the unified field and explain it. And no one's been successful. So Rulin was so frustrated for a time, she gave up. And then she met Master Sha, unrelated to her core interest in science, and was trained and became a healer herself. And then she realized that what Master Sha was doing explained the true nature of the unified field, and went back and worked with Master Sha to develop what she calls the science. And so there are now other scientists who are looking at the formulations that Rulin and Master Sha have created together. They even came up with an equation to explain it all. And it's fascinating. And it does support, from a scientific perspective, this is why people like Deepak Chopra have jumped on the bandwagon and have attended special events that we've held with both Dr. Rulin and Master Sha, trying to understand how this healing really works. Because for me, it's wonderful, and it is enough if you're in need just to go without understanding the science of it. But my father was a chemist. He studied with Urey, who won the Nobel Prize in chemistry. So I was raised where you really had to have scientific method if you were going to accept something. And so I've been pushing for that. And I think there's a lot of people who feel similarly. The results are great, but how does it work? Why does it?
I think many listeners like you who have that background, they say evidence-based, right?
Yes.
I just did a big project with Mayo Clinic. I'm now working with Dr. Richie Davidson, the guy that's worked with Dalai Lama for the last 30 years, who has now an app out, right? So Dalai Lama says to him, don't study anxiety and depression, study compassion and whatever. So he dedicates his whole life to this. And I was back in Wisconsin 2 weeks ago with the whole team. The point is that, he puts all the electrodes on the head, and they do the studies, and they say, neurologically, this is exactly what's happening under stress. This is what's going on, right? So, he is saying he has the biggest evidence-based pool of data that actually warrants mindfulness meditation practices, right? Which we're doing. So is that, and then I have someone else on the other end of the spectrum, Bill, that says, hey, but there's a symptom that's causing that stress. Are you treating that? Or are you just doing the meditation and mindfulness practices? And that would be like, hey, adverse childhood experiences, the ACE studies that many doctors here at Kaiser have been working on with people and so on. And, you say, you look at this community around your science and evidence-based. And I think for a lot of people, it's very important, whether they're on my show or they're not, or they're just out there listening to this podcast, they kind of want proof, right?
Well, this is exactly where I'm headed as well.
Okay.
So Master Sha, in addition to working with, he attracts very bright, intelligent, dedicated people. So one of his master teachers is a man, Dr. Peter Udoba, who was a neuroscientist, very highly regarded. I forget which university in Canada, but one of the best. And anyway, he has teamed up with Dr. and Master Sha, and they've done studies and medical studies that with hundreds of patients, evidence-based studies showing the effectiveness. So that was part of my research, and this has been ongoing.
And is that is that kind of something that's coming up in the next series of the book?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, because I'm waiting for the final, because as you know, with science, okay, now we have this study, now you have to replicate it. I mean, they're doing as thorough research as was done, well, more thorough, frankly, in my opinion, than, for the COVID vaccines, where everybody was.
Yeah, no, I know there. I got the whole controversial stuff around that, but here, look, your daughter had cancer. My
stepdaughter, but yeah, and this is totally documented, and we could get her on the show as well. So she was diagnosed with breast cancer, 4th stage, which is pretty serious. They said, you're going to have an operation. We're going to have to remove the breast. And, there's no guarantee we get there in time. you could still have cancer after that happens. And many women die from this. So this was all scheduled. We found out this was when Master Sha was just starting to use the calligraphies. This was probably about 8 years ago. It was after I'd written the first edition, of the book. But so, we called, and because of our relationship, he sent her a calligraphy and he sent her a chant, and she played it religiously and she traced. And I think she got all that about a month before her operation. And when they went in to operate on her, they said, this is kind of strange. We can't find the cancer, but we know it was there a month ago. And we're going to still go ahead with the operation because we don't want to take the chance that we're just not finding it. So they did operate on her anyway. But the good news is the cancer has never returned. There is no cancer right now. And this is 8 years. So this was quite, miraculous. I had some small things that had given me sort of eye opener. Maybe this really does work when I was skeptical. I play a lot of golf, and I had a big tournament coming up, and I had golfer's elbow. Greg, I think, is a golfer, and other golfers will know you can't really play when your elbow is inflamed. And I was, thinking I wasn't going to play in the tournament. I casually mentioned to Master Sha, I had this little condition because I had a meeting with him just like 2 days before the tournament. And he said, oh, that's nothing. Here. And he immediately drew a little diagram, calligraphy, actually in a book. We didn't even have paper with us. And he drew it in a book. And he said, here, you just, and at that time he didn't even have the technique. He said, you just hold this book, this image that I just created.
On your arm.
On the arm, 5 minutes tonight, 5 minutes in the morning, in 2 days, you'll have no problem. And he was right. And I played in the tournament. I actually won the tournament. So that was like, okay, this is just good luck. It doesn't prove anything. It was very important to me, but we didn't test.
But you said something earlier, right at the beginning of this, and I think for my listeners, you had this amazing trust in what Dr. Sha said. Well, in other words, we know that in MIT and all the places that have studied, healing. Look, it's I'm trying to think of the book. It wasn't that long ago, but where people come back again and again for things that they basically don't take care of in their life, right? They're not good patients. In your case, you had this amazing belief in him. And I think that's, you were talking about Norman Vincent Peale. I used to ride around and listen to cassette tapes that he did for years in the car, right? And he was so inspiring to me. I say that many times he helped me out of depression as thousands of times, right?
Absolutely. No,
from what he said, right?
I agree with you. And that is a strong component. And obviously, if you have trust and you have belief, that's going to increase significantly the success you're going to have. But let me give you another story that kind of shows you don't even need that in the case of Dr. and Master Sha. My biological daughter, Tara, was getting married, and we really made a big deal out of it. We rented an island off of Cadaqués in Spain, hundreds of thousands of dollars being spent. And 2 weeks before the wedding, she had fallen or hurt her ankle foot area. And she was in a boot. She couldn't walk. She went to the medical doctors. They said, oh, we're so sorry, but there's no way you're going to be able to walk down the aisle. This is going to take months to heal. It's not going to heal in 2 weeks. So, well, I've got so much on the line. I call up Dr. Master Sha. I said, is there anything you can do to help? I said, oh, I'll do a calligraphy. I can't guarantee results, but I'll send it and we'll see what happens. So she gets the calligraphy 3 days before the wedding, starts tracing, and she is totally skeptical, but she's desperate. It's like she's got nothing else, available. So she does it. Miraculously, she's able to walk, and this is not a normal aisle. This is like a quarter of a mile because we're on an island. It's a dirt path. And she loves to dance. Not only was she able to walk down the aisle, she danced till 4 a.m. Wedding went on quite a while. She did several weeks later have to have some more treatment because there was a break or a fracture. I mean, it didn't totally heal it, but it healed it enough, even without her believing necessarily in Dr. and Master Sha. And so that got my attention because
Well, obviously you are a believer in
Yeah.
Dr. Sha. And I think my listeners understand by now that if they're looking for alternatives, this is a good book to look to. It's a good introduction book. It's a good way to get exposed to this. It's a good way for you to explore alternatives to healing in your whole life, right? Now, and that's what I was going to ask here, and kind of wrapping up things. You filled this book with stories about Dr. and Master Sha's soul healings. What would you like the listeners to know about how they can access? Because, he's about teaching other people how to use what he knows.
Well, he has a wonderful group of people that are now, implementing his techniques.
Okay.
It's very hard at this time to have a one-on-one session with Dr. and Master Sha. He does blessings. He's evolved. He's now blessing water. So he has Tao water. And once a week, you can go online and, have a session. It's a group session, of course, and he blesses water. And there's hundreds of reports of people just from this water blessing, then drinking the water. And there's a technique he's very much about gratitude. In everything that he does, he's always giving gratitude to the Tao, to the source, to what others might call their God or whatever their, sense of creation is. And what Dr. Sha explains is, I can heal myself, you can heal yourself. Together, we can heal the world. And he really feels that everyone's obligation is to heal themselves whenever possible. Because when you heal yourself, you're raising the vibration of not only yourself, but of the planet. And we're all connected, interconnected. And this is what quantum physics is showing us. And it's by raising the health and the vibration of the planet that we are really able to heal ourselves. And healing ourselves is the first step. And then you can learn to heal others. You can use these techniques. And if you want to follow this, and some people, can create a career out of it or a sideline, he'll teach you how to do that. There's many, many classes, and all of this is available
So
online.
where would our listeners go to learn more? I know it's in your book.
Yeah, I think
You
it's
have a
just
reference.
www.drsha.com. I'm not good with all the technical.
Well, here's what I'll do.
Yeah.
I will put a link in the blog for my listeners so that they can go to Dr. Sha's website. I will also put a link to Waterside Productions so people can.
So one of the things that actually I'm going to recommend right here on the show is I'll connect you with Dr. and Master Sha. I'm sure he would love to be on your show. And what he does when he's on shows, in addition to answering your questions, he'll do a blessing for all of your listeners. He'll actually do a blessing that can have significant healing impact. And one of the things about Master Sha is he doesn't limit it just to physical, mental, emotional, and even things related to career, finances, marriage relationships. His techniques work with all areas of life. So, it's really a blessing to have him.
I'm sure he's had impacts on millions of lives, whether he knows it or not. The reality is that, there's, I don't want to say it, these people that have come on the planet to do this kind of work as sages and healers, and there's many of them. Obviously, we have many on the show, but I wanted to expose his work, one, because of you. I really respect you and the kind of authors that you've actually brought to the forefront over the years, and the things that you've done. And I really think that this is great for our listeners. So for everybody out there listening, we're going to put a link to Dr. Sha's website. And we're also going to put a link to Waterside's website. And Bill, if the listeners want to get the book, I know it's on Amazon, so we'll put a link to Amazon as well to pick up the book there. And if anybody has any questions about this, say probably go to the Dr. Sha website and type an email in and do a contact. And we will get Dr. Sha on the show. to actually speak with our listeners and do a blessing and a healing that Bill is speaking about here, that would be wonderful. And Bill, seriously, thank you for taking this time to talk with our listeners about the book is called Dr. and Master Sha, Miracle Soul Healer by William Gladstone. There you go. Pick up a copy, do that today. And if you have any other questions or contact us here at Inside Personal Growth. Namaste to you, Bill.
Well, thank you so much. Really enjoyed the interview. Look forward to talking with you again and getting some more of our wonderful authors on your show.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.